Welcome to ePathshala PG courses on computer science. We will discuss about the next module working with JDBC. The objective of the module is to introduce about SQL in order to work with JDBC, and we will also try to understand how to access database using JDBC. We will practice simple programs using this JDBC API. So, as SQL we know that it is structured query language, and this SQL has got standardized syntax for querying or accessing or manipulating a relational database. So, this to refresh what are the syntax, the SQL statements, we will use it in a JDBC program. We will see the syntax SQL syntax to insert into a record into a table. So, to insert a new record into the table, we will use a syntax like insert into, the name of the table has to be given, the field, the different field name you want to insert and the values you want to insert. And in order to change an existing record in the table, you can make use of a statement called update statement. So, update, give the name of the table, set whatever field with the values, and you can select using a where clause, you can select the record and you can make an update. And to remove all the records, or you can, if you want to remove a record from the table that matches a condition, then you can write a statement like delete from table name where whatever condition, that is you can say that which record you want to delete in the condition. And in order to view or display or retrieve all the records that matches the condition, you can make use of a select statement. So, select what are the fields you want to display from the table name given the condition. So, these are the SQL statements we will be using it within the JDBC application. So, some few steps to know that how you start working with the database. So, as a first step you have to, supposing you try to work with MySQL, you can first try to install MySQL database. So, you can go to the official MySQL site website and then you can start installing it. You can download it and then install it. So, you can select the platform type either Windows or Mac and download the installer. So, you can see here MySQL installer, you can download it, and then once you have a MySQL, you can open the MySQL command line and you can enter the password. So, once you enter the password, you can create database by using the command like create database name. So, here you can see here we have created a database called employee. So, create database employee. So, it is a MySQL command prompt you will have and you can start working in the MySQL. So, from the list of database created, you can use whatever database you can use it, you want to use it. So, make use of a command like use and then change it as test, the database name can be given. And now once you create a database, you can create any number of tables within the database. So, use the create statement to create the table. So, create table and you can give the name of the table within which you can give what are the different fields or the attributes you want to have it in your table. And similarly, you can also make an insert record into the table. So, make use of your insert statement, insert into table name and give the values. If you want to insert the data for all the fields, you can directly use values and give the data. So, here is where we try to insert some records, few records into the table called employees. And once you create the table and once you have inserted all the records, you can list all the values that are stored in the table. So, you can use a statement like select star from table name. So, here select star from the table name is employees. So, you can see here the table is listed, the table records are listed. And if you want to delete a particular row from the table, you can make use of the delete statement. So, we have executed a statement like delete from employees where ID equal to 104. So, you give the condition and check for the matching record and you can remove the record from the table. And similarly, you can also update the values in a row. So, you can make use of the update statement. So, update table name, set whatever column you want to give the new value and where you can give a condition on which you try to find for a matching record. So, now this is what the different SQL statements you will be having it in your Java program, JDBC program. So, coming to transaction, transaction is not a single statement, it would be a sequence of statements where either all the statements should get executed or none at all. So, in order to maintain the ACID property, we normally ACID property, or in order to maintain the database to be in a consistent state, we normally do two operations, either a commit operation if the transaction is complete, or you can roll back a transaction if you want to abort the transaction. So, you do not want to leave your database inconsistent. So, none of the transactions are done halfway. So, either the full transaction should get executed. So, once a transaction gets executed, we normally in database give a commit statement in order to commit all the things to the permanently to the database, or you can abort it so that you can reverse all the previous actions you have done to the database. Now, to work with the database, we need to know what are how to map the Java types to the SQL types. So, in SQL, when you create the table, you give the data type for the different fields within the table. So, you would have given like varchar, or it can be a character or a numeric or a decimal. So, this SQL type is mapped to string in Java type, and if you are using a numeric or decimal, this is mapped to big decimal in Java. If SQL type is a bit, then it is mapped to boolean in Java type, and similarly you can see tiny integer is mapped to byte, and small int is mapped to short in Java, and integer is mapped to int in Java, and big int is mapped as long, and then you can see date is mapped to java.sql.date, which is available in the util package, and time is mapped to sql.time, and timestamp is mapped to java.sql.timestamp. So, you need to know that how this SQL types are mapped to Java types. And in order to support times in time data type in SQL, we have 3 classes. As I told you, you have a class called date, time, and then timestamp. So, date is for representing year, month and day, and time is for hours, minutes and seconds, and timestamp we normally prefer to use, where you can have your data stored as year, month, day, hours, minutes, seconds and then nanoseconds. It is an optional one. Now, coming to the JDBC, the interface classes you have in the API. So, as I told you, you will be importing the package called java.sql.star, and within this package you have the different classes which now we will see that how we are going to use. So, we have a driver manager class, and we are not going to use the driver class, instead we are going to use a driver manager class from the API, and we have a connection class. We need to build a connection to the database, and you have a statement class. There is a statement called callable statement or prepared statement. So, these are the 3 different kinds of statements you can create. Then we have a class called result set class, then we have result set metadata and database metadata. So, the steps how you want to write your JDBC communication with the database. The first step, you have to import the package. Second step, you have to register the JDBC driver, and the third step, you have to open a connection to the database. Once you open a connection, you can create a statement object, and a single connection would be essential, or that would be enough for making different statements executed with the database. So, you have to create a statement object. Then once you have a statement, you can execute a query, and that can return a result set. It depends upon whether you use an execute query or execute update. And if you are using an execute query to execute the statement, then that would return a result set object, and you need to process the result set. So, once you complete processing the result set, you have to close the result set and the statement objects, then you have to close the connection. So, this is a very simple example how you start writing a JDBC program. So, you start defining the class, then you put your main method. Within this, you first give the JDBC URL. So, here it is given as JDBC :ODBC :JNF, and now you have to load the driver. So, to load the driver, use class.forName and give the driver. So, it is sun.jdbc.odbc.jdbc driver, and then now create a connection. So, to create a connection object, use the driver manager dot get connection method, and this get connection method can take either the JDBC URL or it can take URL with the username and password. So, the username here is given as IT and the password is given as IT at 123. So, you get connected to the database and then now you can start working on it. Here these are the two steps which is very essential to establish a connection to the database. Now you can start executing the SQL statements once the connection is established. So, you can start sending the SQL statement. So, here the query string is going to take a select statement. So, now you have already created a connection object, my connection. So, once you have the connection object, you can make use of the create statement method to create a statement object or prepared statement method to create a prepared statement object. So, here is where you use a create statement and you are trying to create a statement object. So, once you get a statement, you can execute your SQL statement. So, my statement is the statement object. You use a method called execute query to execute your query string. So, here the query string is a select statement. So, you use a method called execute query. If it is an update, delete or an insert, you have to use a method called execute update. So, this execute query would return a result set and now you have to process the result set. Once the result set is processed, you have to close. So, to process the result set, you use the method called next within the result set. So, next is a method in the result set class. So, use the next method and here is where within the result set you have different kinds of method to support the different data types. So, we can give it as get the type. So, the column, the first field is a string, it is a varchar. So, it is mapped to a string data type in Java. So, you can use get string and this is the column index. So, it starts with 1 and not with 0. So, the result set object dot the first field data type and this is the second field data type, it is also string. So, emp name, emp id, we are getting emp salary and we are trying to print it. So, you retrieve the the field values for every record and you are trying to put it on the screen. So, you put a system.out.println to print the employee name, employee ID and the emp salary. So, once the result set, the records from the entire result set is processed, you have to close the statement as well as you have to close the connection. So, here is where you have closed the statement object and you have closed the connection object. So, now let us see about a simple program. It is a running program where you can see that how the we try to make a JDBC connection to the database. So, we first import the package, we start defining a class with the main method and here we dynamically load the driver using class.forName. Then you try to create a connection object. Once you create a connection object, you try to create a statement object. So, use the create statement to create the statement object and now you can, once your statement object is ready, you can execute your SQL statement. So, you can use the method called execute query and give your query string. So, the query string is a select statement. So, you execute your query string which would return a result set. Now, you can process the result set. So, you are trying to retrieve the name, roll number. Here we have given the column name and not the column index. So, you give the first field name, roll number, the next field name is mark 1 and mark 2. So, you retrieve all the things. So, this is the another program. This is actually a complete program where you will know that how you are actually doing the different kinds of database operations. So, the previous code shows that how you are trying to retrieve the records from the database and displaying. Now, this is an example program where you can see that you do an update operation, in insert, a delete as well as a display operations from the database. So, as I told you, you first load the driver and then you need to create a buffered reader object in order to read from the keyboard. So, from the keyboard you are going to read the different kinds of operations what you want to perform. So, all these are given within a while loop. So, as you start giving the options, the option has to be get from the user and it has to it is put in a while loop so that you can keep doing the different operations with the database. So, you have loaded the driver and you have created a connection object. Here you can see the connection object is C. and now you get it from this menu would be displayed. So, this menu shows that you have different options like display, that is what view, you have an option to clear, you have an option to insert records into the table, you have an option to update records in the table, delete some records from the table, and you can exit. So, you get the choice from the user, and you are putting this within a do while loop. So, here we have a switch case which would take you to different options. So, you have different options. Finally, once the user gives the choice which is not equal to 6, it comes out. So, now the different options, we have written the code for the different options. The first, the menu, we had a view option. So, if you take a view option, you have written a code for the display. So, in the display, you have created a new connection object C1. This is to when you are working with multiple SQL statements, single connection object you have to properly close and open. So, what we have done is we have created different connection objects for each of these options. So, you create a connection object C1 and then you create a statement object. Then this is a display option. So, you want to retrieve the records from the table. So, make use of an execute query to retrieve the records from the table called student, and now use the method called next to process over the result set, and then you will try to display all the values. So, the first is going to be the register number of the student, name of the student, the third column is the class of the student, and the fourth field is going to be the mark of the student. So, this is for making a display of the records from the table. So, you put your SQL statements within your Java code, and then you are trying to display in the console. And the next function is an insert function. So, to do an insert function, again we have created till statement object we have created. Now, we try to insert a new record. So, if you want to do an insert operation, we use a method called execute update. So, execute update method is for insert, update as well as for delete operation. So, use the statement object called insert statement dot execute update, you give your insert query string. So, the insert string is given here, we want to insert a new record like 9 JNF VBJ and 100, and then we have committed it. So, committed it is to get the data inserted into the table, and this would normally, when you do an execute update, this returns an integer. That integer shows that how many records gets updated when you do this operation, execute operation. So, the number of rows inserted would be actually the integer value row 1 that is also printed. And the next code is a modify code using which you will try to update a single record in your table. So, here you can see that you have created till a statement object. Now, use a method called execute update. This is common for insert, update and delete. So, use the method execute update, give your update string. So, the update SQL statement is given here. We are setting the mark to be 90 whose register number is 6. So, this is our SQL statement we executed. This row 2 is a variable that gets the number of rows updated. So, you try to commit this operation so that it gets committed in the database. And the next option is for deleting it. So, again you create a statement and then you use the execute update method, give your delete statement. This shows, this would return row 3, which is a variable that shows that how many rows gets affected by the delete statement. So, the number of rows updated can also be printed. And this is the end of it, and we have a clear screen. So, we try to clear all the lines which is printed. So, it is an empty line that is printed for all the 25 lines on the screen. This is actually the result what you get from the program. Here we try to choose the option 5, and I think it is option 4 or 5, and then we try to update the record. And then here this is an option 3 we have chosen to insert record into the table. And this is another option which is where we try to we have displayed all the records. Here we can see that all the record we have inserted so many, the same records inserted many times, and it gets displayed in the screen. Now, so that is a complete program which shows that how you work with the database. It is very simple. Once you know the SQL statements, your SQL statements can be binded within a Java program, and your driver should be there, and you can load your driver and then keep interacting with the database. So, now coming to the transaction management, any transaction is not explicitly opened and closed. So, you need to make use of commit statement. So, either you have to explicitly give a commit to commit all the operations. So, we have seen in the previous program, we have used a commit after you do an insert, an update or a delete. So, here instead of giving an explicit commit statement, you can use a method called auto commit. So, this auto commit can be set as true. By default it is true. So, if the auto commit is true, then every statement is automatically committed. So, whatever operation you do, it gets committed to the database. So, you can use a method called set auto commit and give it as either true or false. By default it is true. So, this set auto commit can either take a true or false value. So, it comes with this method is available in the connection object. So, if auto commit is false, then every statement is added to an ongoing transaction. And so, finally, we have to explicitly commit or roll back the transaction using connection.commit or connection.rollback. And coming to the statements, as I told you, so far we have seen in the example, we have created only the statement object. There are other kind of statement objects you can create, like prepared statement or callable statement. So, now let us see what is prepared statement. So, prepared statements are used for queries that are executed many times. So, only once if you want to execute a statement, you can create a statement object, simply a statement object. If you want to execute a statement for multiple times, same statement for multiple times, then you can create an prepared statement object. So, when you create a prepared statement object, this would be parsed or compiled by the DBMS only once. And a prepared statement would be will have an SQL statement whose values would be set after the compilation. So, your SQL statement would contain question mark when your statement object is created, prepared statement is created. It would be compiled and parsed and you will get a prepared statement object, but the statement will have question marks. So, which would be through which you can provide values, you can set values later on after compilation. So, it can be substituted later with the actual values. So, in order to query with the prepared statement, you can see the query string is given like this. Instead of giving directly like select star from employee where ID equal to 100 or something and salary is greater than 50,000, here we can see that we have not given the values. So, we have put a question mark here. So, the query string has got a question mark whose values would be set after compilation. So, select star from employee where ID equal to question mark and salary is greater than question mark. So, the values can be later given, the actual values can be given. So, and now we create a prepared statement object. We do not create a statement object, instead we create a prepared statement object. So, connection object dot prepared statement, you give the query string, you will get a prepared statement object. So, now this prepared statement object, you can set the values, you can either get it from the keyboard from the user and then set it. So, here we use set string, this is the column index, the first column index which is going to be the ID, and the next one is in salary field. So, the second column index whose salary is going to be 48,000. Now, you can use this prepared statement object and execute the query. So, here execute query does not have the query string, instead prepared statement has got the query string which is compiled and later on you are setting the values that would get executed. So, this returns the result set and the rest of the process would be the same as you have seen earlier. And now, how do you update with the prepared statement object? So, here it is a delete string, we delete from employee where ID equal to question mark, we does not know now and salary is greater than question mark. And now, you try to create a prepared statement object by giving the query string and now you are setting the values for the statement. So, the prepared statement object dot set string and this is the employee ID and this is going to be the salary field. So, it checks for this particular record and if it is there in the table then it deletes it. So, in order to delete it you need to use your execute statement. So, you make use of execute update statement to make a delete operation in the table. So, the prepared statement object dot execute update. So, here too you can note it that execute update does not have the query string, the query string is given along with the statement object. So, this is what the difference between the statement and the prepared statement. So, here you can see that we have the value to be ABC. we create a prepared statement object, and you have the prepared statement as select star from some table R where the attribute field equal to question mark, and we set the string, it can be set int or set string depending upon the different data types of the field in the table. So, set string and you are getting the value and you are setting in the prepared statement. Now, you are executing the query. If you see in the create statement, here you can see that the same way you get the value string value, and then create statement is empty, which says that you create a statement object. But here prepare statement is getting a query string, whereas here create statement does not get anything. So, you create a statement. Now, when you are executing the query, you are actually providing the query string. So, the query string is given with the set values. It is not a question mark, you give a value and then you execute the query. So, here the execute query is empty, the query string is given along with the prepare statement, but here when you create the statement you do not give the query string. Once a statement is created, you are executing the query. Now, let us see what is actually result set metadata. As I told you, there are two more classes called result set metadata, and there is another class called the database metadata. You can also take the data metadata from the database. So, this result set metadata is an object. This is to get information about the properties of the columns in the result set object. So, result set is the query result once you execute a select statement. So, from the result set object you want to get the properties, get the meta information, you can make use of result set metadata. So, now you can see here how to create a result set metadata. So, you use a method called in the result set object, RS is the result set object, use a method called get metadata, using which you get result set metadata object. And now once you get a result set metadata object, we are using a method called get column count. So, get column count would return the number of columns, and for each of the column you want to know the name of the column. So, you can use a method called get column label. So, get column label of whatever index. So, I starts from 1. So, index 1 is it denotes the first column. So, every column name can be printed. So, you can get the meta information about the result set using the object called result set metadata. Okay. So, now what we have seen so far is how to work with SQL. We have seen something about how you can work easily with MySQL, and once you are familiar with SQL, you can start working with JDBC. So, we have seen that how to write simple JDBC program within which you have embedded your SQL statements, and we have also discussed about the transaction management, how it is happening in JDBC. Thank you.